Hello, property nomads. Hope you're doing well. Part of the King's speech the other day, he mentioned about Great British Energy and the government looking to put in about £8.3 billion into this newly, or what will be a newly established energy company for Great Britain. And I'm here to tell you that that is a very dangerous thing, and not everything is quite as it seems. Let's head over to an article. I actually wrote a little while ago. So Great British Energy will have 8.3 billion of public cash over the course of Parliament, supposedly including 1.2 billion from raising windfall tax on oil and gas companies. It won't supply electricity to households. The plan is for it to reinvest its cash alongside private companies. The idea is that GB Energy will help to kickstart new renewable technologies, call for additional investment in existing technologies, and work with local communities to develop small and medium-sized renewable projects. My favourite one and the most laughable line, I think, at the bottom is the government says GB Energy will also drive down bills. Right, so where do we start? Where do we start with this? So first of all, I would say, where is 8.3 billion going to come from? Now, if you're saying, well, Rob, they're going to, get 1.2 billion from raising the windfall tax on oil and gas companies, then 8.3 minus 1.2 is 7.1. Where are you going to get 7.1 billion pounds from? If the answer to that is let the Bank of England just create it, then congratulations, you're contributing to inflation, and we'll probably see inflation keep roaring moving forwards. So how it's being funded, no one's quite clear of at the moment. Perversely, raising the windfall tax on oil and gas companies is also not a good thing. We've seen challenges come out recently over some of the nuclear plants that are being proposed in Britain. We've seen more uproar about the potential, I think it's new coal plant up in Cumbria, first one in 30 years in the UK. There's been uproar about from environmentalists about that, because the same people seem to think that we live in this form of utopia and that everything's got to be wind and solar. Wind and solar will power the world. Well, right, but what if it's not windy? And what if the sun don't come out? We've just seen it recently with an IT failure that caught, I would imagine, billions of people by surprise. They weren't expecting that. I'm not going to go even down the route of a conspiracy theory on that. But these people weren't anticipating that. It happened, and everyone was in panic. GB Energy won't supply electricity to households, because I'm sure there's workings around with all energy companies to rinse people as best as they can in terms of high unit prices, of course. The plan is for it to invest its cash alongside private companies. Well, okay, that sounds okay, but it depends what you're investing into. Because when I read things like to help kickstart new renewable technologies like tidal and wave power, floating wind turbines, and carbon capture and storage, what the hell could possibly go wrong with all of that? All that says to me is subsidies, printing currency, subsidies, higher bills for you and I. Because those subsidies will have to be passed on somehow. That's what it sounds like to me. Let me know if that's what it sounds like to you. Give us a like, give us a comment below. Things like carbon capture and storage. I listened to a wonderful podcast called Macro Voices. Highly recommend you go and check that out. Run by Eric Townsend, Nick Galanik, and Patrick Seresna, I believe. Eric Townsend does the most of the interviewing and talking. They've spoken briefly about carbon capture and storage before. I don't remember much of it, I have to say. I remember that I've listened to it, and actually that sounds quite interesting. So it'll be interesting to see what happens down that line, if that's where the government's going. GB Energy calls for additional investment in existing technologies such as wind, solar, and nuclear power. Whereas you've probably heard so many times on this channel, and I'll say it again, wind and solar are not baseload energy. Nuclear power is baseload energy. You need your baseload in order for things like wind and solar to flourish. That's what you need. That is exactly what you need. So if it's me, I'm not looking at wind and solar. They can go away for a little bit. I'm looking at nuclear. Get your baseload energy up and running. Make the UK become as sustainable as possible, as quickly as possible. That will mean that will need changes to planning, rules and regulations in order to make sure that nuclear power stations can be built. That will also mean that we need to get as much nuclear up and running as possible. Wind and solar, yes, it does have its place, but again, additional investment in existing technologies such as wind and solar, to me, that just screams subsidies, higher unit costs for you and I. Same with the third point, work with local communities to develop small and medium-sized renewable projects. Again, that to me, a bit of working in the community never harms, but it's a very vague point. Government also says that GB Energy will also drive down bills. Now, if I wasn't being as professional as I am doing this video, I'd just be laughing my backside off, because I do not see how that is possible. You are talking about a lot of investment. First of all, you're talking about finding 7.1 billion potentially down the back of a sofa. Remember, that's 8.3 minus that potentially 1.2 billion here, 7.1. You're talking about potentially finding 7.1 billion down the back of a sofa. Fine. Now, if you don't do that, what happens there? You likely print it into existence. Print it into existence equals inflation. If you then are looking to kickstart and invest further into things like wave power, tidal power, floating wind turbines, wind and solar, again, not good. That to me, that it just says subsidies. It just says printing a bunch of cash, sending a bunch of cash out to privatized companies, energy companies. They'll milk it a little bit, and it might sound like it's free, but then you will see that at the end of the month on your bills, whether it be a gas bill, an electric bill, those unit prices would have gone up, because I imagine they will. And also, I imagine a standing charge would go up. So I don't see how that is actually lowering your bill whatsoever. Now, if you put it into nuclear, great. Again, that would be absolutely superb. The more nuclear, the merrier. That would be delightful. That can then help to facilitate a transition to greener energy safely and securely. One thing in this particular thing here, and again, although I wrote the article itself, this segment here with the grey background was taken from the BBC. I've even put it as a source here as well. One thing that was never mentioned that should be mentioned was funding for the grid. So with the national grid, we are starting to overload it unnecessarily because of a lot of, again, wind projects, solar projects, all of these things being built and producing energy, fine, but that is being fed into an old grid structure. That grid structure needs improving. And now how they do that is, I don't know how that's going to be done. I've seen various reports of a lot of pylons being installed, underwater cables, whatever it might be. Again, you know, I know, everyone knows, whenever they get round to doing that, you know the project is going to come in over budget. It's going to be a lot of brown envelopes. There's going to be a lot of cream in the profit off the top. And it's going to take a lot longer than we all anticipate. And by that time, anything could happen. Because, hey ho, it's a project in the UK. These are the things that happen most of the time, if not all the time. Just saying. So I don't see how Great British Energy is then going to drive down bills. My personal opinion, I'll be somewhere in Mexico, I think, or somewhere in a different part of the world, looking in to see what's happening in the future. I don't know. So Great British Energy, again, I'll keep you posted. We'll keep you posted and updated as best as we can. It's one of those things that sounds like a good idea, but actually, when you start digging into it, then you start to realize actually it could be quite an inflationary toy that the Labour Party have just created. And also, we look at our energy and the way that we're going with all this net zero and becoming more eco-friendly. Again, going down this route really is counterproductive, because even raising the windfall tax on oil and gas companies, doing away with licenses for them, etc. Well, oil and gas isn't going to go away anytime soon. We will need oil and gas for quite a while. And if we ever get to a point where we've run out of oil and gas for the UK, because funny enough, we're not handing out licenses anymore, then what's going to happen? We're going to import that. And if you need to import it because your baseload energy is still oil, coal, gas, whatever it might be, put it this way: if your baseload energy is not nuclear, because we have an inability to actually make any nuclear plants in the UK by the sounds of it, then the import costs of that are going to be quite high. That unfortunately gets passed on to the consumer. So your bills, my bills, we will see them increase. So again, I just do not see how they can produce all of this evidence and all this spiel about GB Energy and then at the end say with arguably a straight face, oh yeah, but it will drive down bills. I don't think so. I do not think that's going to happen. You can mark my words on that. That is not going to happen whatsoever. One small favor to ask is to please do subscribe to the channel. Give us a like, give us a subscribe, leave a comment in the comment section below. We're seeing a wonderful uptick in numbers, so thank you very much for doing that. And we'll be back with more videos sometime soon. See you in the next video.